Israel confirms its plans for an offensive on Rafah, issuing Hamas an ultimatum.
We cannot leave a quarter of Hamas's terrorist battalions intact.
Another shocking tribal violence incident in Papua New Guinea. Dozens murdered in the country's highlands. 4 people struck by lightning as intense thunderstorms hit Sydney. And the great Mankini scandal. An Olympian cleared after a complaint over what he wore at a charity event. We'll be interviewing him in about 40 minutes. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Joe O'Brien. After weeks of speculation, Israel has confirmed its plans for an offensive on the city of Rafah. Israeli War Cabinet member Benny Gantz has warned unless Hamas frees all hostages held in Gaza by the start of Ramadan, an offensive will be launched on the overcrowded southern city. Some 1.5 million Palestinians are currently sheltering in Rafah, having been pushed south by Israel's military operations. World leaders have been urging Israel to abandon plans for the offensive, warning it'll lead to a humanitarian catastrophe. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization has confirmed Gaza's second biggest hospital is no longer functional. The IDF launched an operation on the Nasser hospital last week, saying hostages were being held there. Addressing American Jewish leaders in Jerusalem, a defiant Benjamin Netanyahu vowed to continue with the offensive.
We cannot leave a quarter of Hamas's terrorist battalions intact. No one would do that in the case of fighting ISIS. You wouldn't leave a quarter of ISIS intact in a defined territory. You wouldn't even think about that, and you didn't. America finished the job with its allies. We will finish the job here with our brave soldiers. And we will make sure that the civilian population has a way to get out of harm's way, to safe corridors and to safe zones.
Benjamin Netanyahu there, and Global Affairs editor John Lyons joins us now from Jerusalem.
Here we go.
John, just take us through what Benny Gantz had to say about this deadline of March the 10th and the significance of that.
Yes, Joe. Benny Gantz here in Israel is very highly regarded as a military figure. He's a former chief of staff of the Israeli Defence Forces, former defence minister, a would-be prime minister. He's still got strong political aspirations, but most importantly, he's now part of the very small war cabinet that Benjamin Netanyahu has put together since the October 7 Hamas attack. He is now saying that we, the Israelis, are giving Hamas a deadline of Ramadan, the beginning of Ramadan, which is March the 10th, to release all 130 hostages. Now, amongst those hostages, the Israeli army has suggested as many as 30 of them have not survived, so it would be the bodies being returned, and there's between 80 and 100 believed to be still alive. So Benny Gantz is saying if we don't get all those 130 hostages and bodies by March the 10th, we will make a full ground invasion of Rafah.
But with that statement, there's no part of that that suggests if they are released by then the Israeli military won't go into Rafah?
Look, Joe, I think the Americans in particular, Antony Blinken, US Secretary of State, has been shuttling here 5 or 6 times since October 7, trying to broker that deal. The pressure from Washington is that if those hostages are released, essentially the war should finish. Israel disagrees with that. Certainly Benjamin Netanyahu and the far right in his own coalition who keep his government in power, they are saying no. Even if the hostages are released, we must fight till the end. The other interesting thing that Benny Gantz said in that same speech to which you refer was that it could take a year, a decade or a generation to transform Gaza. He didn't indicate what transform means, but the Israelis are settling in for a longer war. The Americans and allies want the war to come to an end.
So what Benny Gantz said would seem to be an incredibly significant statement. Why didn't that come from Benjamin Netanyahu?
Benny Gantz happened to be the one making the speech. In a way, it also could be plausible deniability. It could allow Benjamin Netanyahu, meanwhile, to be negotiating behind the scenes. He is an incredibly astute political operator, Benjamin Netanyahu, so he may have preferred to have the military strongman of the war cabinet giving this sort of deadline. But it is the very first time since October 7 that Israel has actually set a deadline. They have now got their troops surrounding Rafah, and of course the international community, particularly the United States and countries like Australia, are very fearful of what a full invasion of Rafah in that's the furthest southern town of Gaza, where everybody is crowded, what that could mean.
But from what Benjamin Netanyahu has said in the last 24 hours about there being a quarter of Hamas still operational, and that is unacceptable, it seems to be the case that he is determined to go in there regardless.
Certainly there is genuinely, Joe, there's genuinely a rift between the United States and Israel. I know the media often likes to play up rifts, but there's no doubt now that Washington wants this war to come to an end. For political reasons in America, amongst other things. Joe Biden is finding that he's in trouble in states like Michigan, where there's a large Arab American community who are very angry at what they see as America's unqualified support for this war. Yet inside Israel, there's a completely different political dynamic here where I am. The leader of Hamas in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, is still on the loose. It's very difficult for Benjamin Netanyahu to say, we've beaten Hamas, when they haven't even found the commander. There's still a lot of Hamas fighting. There's still rockets coming into Israel. It's very difficult for Benjamin Netanyahu to say, we have smashed and beaten Hamas. And that has always been his primary aim. So he is in a political bind between the Israeli public and politicians on one hand and the United States and the international community on the other.
And John, what is the potential for this to be incredibly catastrophic if the army goes into Rafah, 1.5 million people there, although the Israelis are saying they can move them to another part of Gaza? I was speaking to an IDF spokesman the other night. He was saying they could move them to the north, and they've done that. He said they've done that effectively through this campaign, and so they've shown that they can do that. And I'd also like to just ask you about the suggestion of that area being cleared over the border in Egypt, and what's the likelihood that some Palestinians could be moved into there?
Well, Joe, I spent yesterday down on the Gaza border, on the south of Israel. We spent the day, we're filming with Four Corners, looking into northern Gaza. Through the day, we saw airstrikes. We saw 5 or 6 serious bombings. You could see the smoke in the distance. In other words, the north of Gaza is not yet completely secure from Israel's point of view. So when they say we could move people here or we could move people there, this is not like moving a busload of children on a school camp. There's 1.4 million people, according to Antony Blinken, who is very, very worried about this, crowded into the south. They've moved there because of the fighting in the north and the fighting in the centre. Israel said to people, move out of the way of danger. They moved to the south. There's still fighting, and there's still bombs going off, and there's still booby traps going on in the centre and the north of Gaza. So the idea that 1.4 million people can be herded or encouraged to go to the centre of Gaza or to the north, it's frankly, when you look into Gaza, as I did yesterday, it is absurd.
And what about this area that's apparently being cleared in Egypt, the likelihood that people could be sent there?
Well, another fascinating development here in the last day or two, Egypt is frantically putting up this big new wall, big new concrete wall. They're bringing in bulldozers, they're bringing in cranes to try to put them all the way across the border down to the Mediterranean Sea. In other words, Egypt is bracing for the possibility of those 1.4 million people in desperation crashing through that gate at Rafah and essentially trying to get to safety inside the Sinai Desert, which would, of course, be another completely higher level of humanitarian disaster. Israel is also trying to clear about a kilometre inside the border between Israel and Gaza. While we were there yesterday for Four Corners, we saw truckload after truckload of major bulldozers coming in on the back of them. They're trying to clear a 1 or 2 kilometre inside the border, which they say will be a buffer zone. They're saying it's for security. And again, it's important to restate what triggered this particular war was the atrocious and barbaric attacks by Hamas on October 7. Israel's view, completely understandable, is we cannot let that happen ever again.
OK, John Lyons reporting there from Jerusalem. Papua New Guinea police have revised down the death toll in a massacre in the country's highlands. It's now believed 26 men were killed in the ambush in Enga province. PNG correspondent Tim Swanston reports from Port Moresby.
It's a truly harrowing event that's occurred in Papua New Guinea's highlands. Now, what we do know is that police say that 2 tribes that were warring in the region, one was about to attack another when they were ambushed. That tribe, along with their mercenaries and allies, it appears many have been killed. Now, the acting superintendent, George Kakas from the Royal Papua New Guinea Police Constabulary, said that those who responded to the incident were devastated. He said it's by far the largest killing he's seen in Enga province, maybe in all of the highlands, as well as Papua New Guinea. He says that we're devastated, we're all mentally stressed out, and it's really hard to comprehend. We know that tribal fighting has been a key issue for Papua New Guinea's internal security for many years now. We did see an escalation of tribal fighting about 2 years ago during the election. Last year, dozens were killed in tribal violence that's especially escalated because of the use of deadly firearms. Of course, something that really changes the nature of tribal fighting that was often fought in much more traditional methods. It appears that this latest massacre has taken place because those men were shot and killed.
This type of carnage is only made possible through the use of many small arms, and it is a concern.
Speaking to the Governor, Sir Peter Ipatas, this morning, he said it's a very sad occasion in the province and a very bad thing from the country. He says that the police and security forces need to take ownership and be on the ground, assess the situation and take appropriate action. So we get to see much response from PNG's government this morning. We'll, of course, really firmly put PNG's internal security right back into the spotlight, as well as potentially putting pressure on Australia and their response and how it assists PNG with these deadly crises. But the vision that came out from yesterday evening was just harrowing, and it'll certainly send shockwaves through the country.
Tim Swanson reporting there from Port Moresby. A war of words has erupted in Canberra over border protection policies and the arrival of 39 men from Indonesia. The group was discovered by locals in remote WA in the north. It's led to a national security stoush between the 2 major parties. Here's political reporter Stephanie Boris in Canberra.
There isn't too much information we know about this group, and that's because there is a lot of secrecy around Operation Sovereign Borders. This policy put into place in 2013 by the coalition government, and under the coalition government and now this government, not much information is released. But what we do know is that 39 men were discovered by locals in remote Western Australia on Friday, and these men told the locals that they had arrived by boat from Indonesia. Now, that occurred on Friday, and by late Saturday night, early into Sunday, these men were already in transit on their way to Nauru. They're now in an offshore processing detention centre on Nauru that, of course, is funded by the Australian government. Now, this is the first time a boat has arrived in Australia without being detected since late last year. But to give you an indication as to how rare it is for a boat to make it all the way to Australia, official documents, while they're not super clear, the indication is just over 20 boats have arrived or haven't been detected, haven't been turned back between 2013 and 2023. So the opposition leader, Peter Dutton, today has said, the government is too weak to protect the borders, pointing to the fact that this boat has arrived. And Mr Dutton earlier today was questioning whether there is enough surveillance in place to ensure Australia's borders remain protected.
I think the government absolutely has got all sorts of problems at the moment, because it's clear that they don't have the same surveillance in place that we had when we were in government. It's inconceivable that a boat of this size, carrying 40 plus people, could make it to the mainland without there being any detection. I don't think you can take this Prime Minister at face value. You certainly can't take his word as his bond.
So have there been changes to how Operation Sovereign Borders works?
Well, the head of Operation Sovereign Borders, Joe, has released a statement over the weekend. That's quite unusual in itself. We don't hear from him often, and he was saying the mission of Operation Sovereign Borders has not changed. That said, the opposition is pushing a few elements. The first, they're questioning whether surveillance is still as high as what it was in previous years. We heard late last year in Senate estimates that, yes, the number of surveillance hours had dropped, but the Australian Border Force insisted that drop was then actually covered by the Defence Force. The opposition is also saying that there is a cut in funding for the Australian Border Force. That's something that's being disputed by the government. And on temporary protection visas, opposition leader Peter Dutton says by abolishing those, the government has abolished those, that means that one of the pillars, the key pillars in his words, has been removed from Operation Sovereign Borders. But from a practical sense, TPVs are not needed because these people are being sent to offshore processing centres. Let's take a listen to what the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, said earlier today.
The opposition are just full of nonsense, and they should stop being a cheer squad for people encouraging people smuggling. What we have in place is Operation Sovereign Borders is there, and they've had a different line every few hours. So I'll wait for the next one.
Now, the government did spend all of last week, Joe, defending its national security credentials. That was around the debate regarding the people that have been released from immigration detention here in Australia following that High Court ruling. And the arrival of this boat is really breathing new life into that debate, which is expected to continue for at least the next few days.
The South Australian Government is looking at changing serious and high-risk offender legislation to ensure Snowtown killings accomplice Mark Hayden can be supervised when he completes his jail sentence. Hayden is one of the 4 men jailed over the Bodies in the Barrels murders. The 65-year-old is due for release in May after spending 25 years behind bars for helping to cover up the killings. The state government will introduce laws to broaden the definition of serious offenders to include people who assist in murders and sexual crimes. The SA Attorney-General is concurrently applying to the Supreme Court to have Hayden placed on an extended supervision order.
This is an important step forward. We have an unqualified view that people who are high-risk offenders related to sexual offences or murderers should be subject to extended supervision order regimes in order to keep the community safe. And now is not the time for the Parliament to take too long to consider the options that we put before them. There is a need, in our view as a government, to act with a degree of urgency, not in a panicked way, but in a prudent and timely way to get legislation through the Parliament so we can maximise the likelihood of keeping South Australians safe.
4 people have been knocked unconscious by a lightning strike at Sydney's Botanic Gardens as storms swept through parts of New South Wales. Nearly 20,000 homes have lost power in the city's north and the Hunter region as heavy winds and showers lashed parts of the state's east. Reporter Sarah Gerrithy has more from Sydney.
Well, a severe storm swept into Sydney this afternoon and 4 people who were sheltering under a tree at the Royal Botanic Gardens just near the Opera House were treated by paramedics after the tree was hit by lightning. Now, those 4 people, 2 men and 2 women, were treated for burns and also are being monitored for the cardiac effects that can occur after a lightning strike. The good news is that all 4 were transported to hospital in a stable condition, so 2 are at St Vincent's Hospital and 2 are at RPA. But there are severe thunderstorm warnings in place across much of the state. Since early this morning, there have been hundreds of thousands of lightning strikes around the state and tens of thousands of homes are without power today.
Sarah Gerrithy there in Sydney. And Sydney Star Casino will face a second inquiry less than 18 months after a damning report found it was unfit to hold a casino licence. The Independent Casino Commission says it's concerned the Star hasn't done enough to clean up its act since it was found to have become a haven for organised crime, money laundering and fraud. Star Entertainment Group shares were placed in a trading halt ahead of the announcement, which comes just a day before it's due to deliver its half-yearly results. The new inquiry will run for 15 weeks. Four Corners returns tonight on ABC TV with an investigation into the powers of the two main supermarkets, Coles and Woolworths, with claims they're using tactics to keep prices and their profits high while customers do it tough. The show has spoken to the CEOs of both supermarket chains.
Rod Sims, the former head of the ACCC, says that we have one of the most concentrated supermarkets in the world. Is he lying?
It's not true, and it is not true. This community over here, there will be 3 Coles stores within 2 kilometres of it, at least 1 Aldi store, a series of independents, ability to, within 24 hours, have a quarter of our store delivered to you by Amazon. It is an incredibly competitive market. The risk people have is...
the former head of the Competition Commission says, his words are that we have...
by the way.
I don't think you would impugn his integrity and his understanding of competition law.
I'm just saying the world has got much more competitive.
He retired 18 months ago. He's not...
Okay, can we take that out? Is that okay? I mean, he is retired, but I shouldn't have said that, Angus. Are we going to leave it in there if we are?
Well, I mean, we're on the record. You said it. I mean, you know, let's move on, but...
Yeah, no, I think I'm done, guys. I do this with good intent. You know, I don't do this with bad intent.
You're walking out, really?
No. Can we just talk through Brad for a second?
Let me just
have a minute.
Let's keep going.
Yeah, so you can see that full story tonight on Four Corners at 8:30 on ABC TV and anytime later on ABC iView. Supporters of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny are risking arrest to lay tributes following his sudden death last week. Operatives dressed in black can be seen removing flowers from a makeshift memorial in St. Petersburg, which were quickly replaced by new ones. Mr. Navalny died in prison last week while serving a 19-year sentence. His supporters believe he was murdered on the order of President Vladimir Putin. Mr. Navalny's wife is expected to meet in Brussels with EU ministers who want to honour her husband's memory. Parts of northern China have been hit by severe sandstorms and heavy snowfall, leaving thousands of people stranded. A thick layer of yellow cloud is blanketing buildings and highways in several cities, leaving travellers no choice but to abandon their vehicles. In some areas, the sand and dust has reduced visibility to less than 100 metres. Authorities warn the conditions could last for several days. Stars have descended on London for the British Academy Film Awards, and like all the awards this season, Oppenheimer has dominated. The historical biopic about the man behind the atomic bomb has won 7 of the 13 awards it was nominated for. Barbie, the biggest blockbuster of the year, has missed out, and all Australian nominees have gone home empty-handed.
I don't know if we can be trusted.
And the BAFTA goes to Oppenheimer.
A 3-hour epic about the creation of the atom bomb was the night's big winner.
Christopher Nolan.
Cillian Murphy.
Oppenheimer won 7 BAFTAs, including Best Picture, Director and Leading Actor for Cillian Murphy.
Let's make sure we're not the ones to make that possible.
The film, which earned more than $1 billion at the box office, dominated the Golden Globes and Critics' Choice Awards and has now cemented its status as the front-runner for Oscars glory.
Hi, Ken. Hi, Barbie.
Last year's top-grossing film, Barbie, and Australian actress Margot Robbie were again snubbed. It was nominated for 5 BAFTAs, but got none. Robbie, who channeled the doll on the red carpet, lost out to Emma Stone, who won Leading Actress for Poor Things.
Good evening.
Her brain and her body are not quite synchronized.
The Frankenstein-esque fantasy took 5 prizes.
I just thought that maybe I could help.
Australian Jacob Elordi from the psychological thriller Saltburn also missed out.
Do we still have enough votes?
With Robert Downey Jr. taking out Best Supporting Actor.
Maybe we've done all that we
He
can.
also missed out on the Rising Star Award along with Australian actress Sophie Wilde.
Talk to me.
It is no exaggeration to say this room has in it the greatest actors in the world.
The BAFTAs really are Britain's night of night when it comes to the world of cinema, and the awards handed out here are often seen as a good indication of what can be expected at the Oscars next month. Movie fans around the world will have been watching to see how their favourites fared. Guest of honour was Prince William in his role as president of the BAFTAs. He arrived without his wife Catherine, who's recovering from surgery. There were musical performances and a dog named Bark Ruffalo.
This is fine, this is fine.
With the glamour and the gongs of Britain's biggest night for films over, contenders are waiting to see if the Oscars will be a repeat performance. Michelle Rimmer, ABC News, London.
Q&A is back for another year. Here's host Patricia Karvelis with a look at what's coming up on tonight's show.
Well, it's our first show for 2024, so that's a pretty good thing to start with. That's a good place to start, Joe. And tonight our big theme is trust. Who can you trust? Can you trust your supermarket? Do you trust the government? I suppose the theme of trust is really important right now because if you speak to anyone who does any research in this area, trust is at record lows. Social cohesion is at record lows. We are having lots of problems in the community getting along and trusting each other, institutions. And so we really thought that would be a good place to start. And of course, if you look at some of the news stories that have been dominating just in the last couple of weeks alone, we've got issues around whether to trust the government after its change in policy on stage 3 tax cuts. The Liberals are trying to frame it that you can't trust the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister says, in fact, he's made this calculated decision based on what the economy needs and what people need, and that makes him trustworthy. And then at the same time, we're today, as you know, having this big discussion around boat arrivals and managing our borders. So all of these discussions I think we're having, and there are lots of links between them with the overarching theme of who we trust and how you build trust and why we're seeing a lack of trust in the community at the moment.
And who's on the show tonight then?
Well, that's quite exciting, let me tell you. We have a pretty interesting mix of people where you'll see lots of different perspectives, which is really what the magic of this show is about. Jelena Dokic joins us, of course.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, look at that. That's the response I was waiting for.
Well, she's such a great commentator.
People love her, and that's because I think it actually goes to the theme of trust. She's so authentic and tells you the truth, and that's how people feel about her, that she doesn't... you know, what you see is what you get with Jelena. So she joins us. Melandiri McCarthy, who's the Assistant Minister for Indigenous Australians. Julian Leeser, who really, I think, on that issue of trust, resigned from his frontbench position during the referendum last year on that issue of trying to be consistent with his ideas around his position on the referendum. Pulitzer Prize-winning author and former journalist Geraldine Brooks. And Gideon Ruckman too, who's a foreign affairs analyst, joins us, and journalist. So a big meaty conversation, I think, about the global pressures we're under, which are immense at the moment. Obviously, the themes that we're seeing play out in Russia, but also the Gaza-Israel war, which continues, and then community relations here. Of course, tonight is a really important Four Corners on supermarkets and pricing, and we're going to have a big, meaty discussion about what we expect of our corporations, given so many Australians are suffering with enormous cost of living pressures.
Good stuff. Thanks, Patricia.
Thanks.
There are showers and storms for the central inland and across eastern Australia. A high will keep elsewhere dry while maintaining hot winds over South Australia. In Queensland, the southeast will see showers and storms. In the northwest, a late shower, and in the southwest, hot. To New South Wales and the ACT, in the northeast, late thunder and warm. In the southeast, mostly cloudy, and in the west, mostly sunny. In Victoria, mostly sunny throughout the state, with cool to mild temperatures in the south and warm to hot in the north. Mildura getting to 35. Now to Tassie, a clearing shower in the southwest, increasing sunshine in the southeast and mild to warm in the north. Mostly sunny in South Australia with very warm to hot temperatures in the west and the north. Coober Pedy getting to 41, as will Port Augusta. In WA, mostly cloudy and hot in the south with, Perth, at least it's not getting over 40 tomorrow, 39 again. Showers increasing in the northeast. Rain also in the Northern Territory with showers and storms in the top end, isolated showers in Arnhem and rain over the interior. Looking ahead to Wednesday in the capital cities, Brisbane showers, Sydney and Canberra possible showers, Melbourne mostly sunny, Hobart partly cloudy, Adelaide sunny, Perth partly cloudy and Darwin possible showers in the top 32. Here are the top stories on ABC News. Israel has confirmed its plans for an offensive in the city of Rafah. Israeli officials warn an offensive will be launched on the southern city unless Hamas frees all hostages by March the 10th. 1.5 million Palestinians are currently sheltering in Rafah, having been pushed south by Israel's military operations in the north. Police in Papua New Guinea have revised down to 26 the number of people killed in a highland massacre. It's believed the men were killed in an ambush in the Enga province. The attack marks a serious escalation of tribal fighting in the province, which has been in lockdown since last year. A political stoush has erupted over border protection policies following the arrival of 39 men in remote WA. The group came by boat from Indonesia and have now been flown to offshore immigration in Nauru. The federal opposition has questioned the level of surveillance being conducted following the arrival. And 4 people have been taken to hospital after being struck by lightning during a thunderstorm in Sydney. They were knocked unconscious by a lightning strike in Sydney's Botanic Gardens and remain in hospital in a stable condition. 20,000 homes are without power in the city's north and the Hunter region after heavy rain and showers lashed the coast. More now on that massacre in Papua New Guinea. Police have revised down the death toll in that tribal dispute in Enga province to at least 26 after revealing they'd received the wrong head count. Sinclair Dinnan is an associate professor at ANU's Department of Pacific Affairs and joins us now from Canberra. Sinclair Dinnan, welcome. First of all, what can you tell us about this Enga province?
Well, Enga province is one of the relatively remote highlands provinces. It's a province in the sort of western part of the highlands of PNG. And it's a province which has experienced a long history of tribal conflicts that appear to have, over the last year or so, become more frequent in their incident and in their intensity. So a very sort of serious problem that has been occurring in Enga for some time now.
Do you know anything about the issue this particular confrontation or violence was over? And if not, what is tribal violence often sparked by?
Well, there are different sort of triggers, if you like, for the kind of conflict that we're seeing. I mean, the first point, I guess, to make about this particular conflict, as far as we know, it is a continuation of a rolling conflict that has been going on for quite some time. And we appear to be in the stage where, if you like, the more sort of killings that occur on one side, the more killings that are sort of required or demanded on the other side. So it's a kind of escalating conflict where previous killings are a very significant part of the ongoing dynamic. In other parts, you know, there are other issues that come to play in terms of catalyzing these kinds of conflicts. Election disputes where candidates from the same group, you know, are on opposing sides that divides communities and groups and so forth. Elections have become a major catalyst or accentuation of conflict in recent time. Land disputes are another sort of reason behind some of these conflicts. So there are different sort of triggers for different conflicts.
And so you mentioned that this was possibly part of a rolling conflict between these two tribes in which a lot of lives have been lost. Did anything kind of in particular spark this particular confrontation, or it's just ended up being kind of tit for tat in terms of murders?
Well, I think, I mean, it's clearly escalating, which is indicative that attempts to sort of settle it down, whether by, state intervention or through local means have yet to succeed. And in the absence of those sort of attempts succeeding, the conflict has clearly developed its own momentum over some time. And the more killings there are, then the more further killings that is likely to lead to without some sort of, intervention that breaks the circuit, some kind of circuit breaker.
Yeah. And so every now and then we hear these terrible stories of the violence up there. What has been done to address it over the years?
Well, lots of different, efforts depending on, where you're talking about these sort of conflicts occurring. One of the sort of conventional attempts is to go in with the police and try to sort of resolve it there. But that's a bit like sort of trying to put a lid on a boiling pot without addressing the kind of heat, the underlying issues. And I think, the lessons of recent years, but I mean, this goes back much further, is that the local experts, the people from those places who understand the social complexities of these conflicts that often have very long histories, and that, in this case, for example, involves over 17 different groups. It's the people on the ground who really know how to navigate this complexity and gradually bring groups together. And so there's a need not only for a kind of policing response, but for a response involving local leaders and their networks to be supported in order to simultaneously address some of the deeper issues that are contributing to conflict in those areas.
Yeah, this one seems so shocking. They've revised the death toll down now, but it's still a really substantial death toll. Do you think this will attract so much attention that there's the potential for this to be a bit of a turning point in how the country approaches these and tries to solve these?
One would hope so. The sort of fighting, and this particular fight has been going on for quite some time, as I said at the beginning, and we know of at least 60 deaths relating to this fight last year. So it's a situation that desperately needs some sort of serious interventions, both at that very local level and at the level of the province, the level of the nation. And I think sort of policymakers in Port Moresby, having sort of witnessed this and hearing it on the news, really have to do something. But it is important simultaneously for those different levels that are involved, from the very local right up through the provincial to the national, and any relevant international support that can be provided to be coordinated and to work in the interests of bringing these dreadful conflicts to an end.
Indeed. OK, Sinclair Dinnan, thanks so much for talking to us from Canberra.
Thank you.
In Alice Springs, some of the country's most vulnerable residents have to represent themselves in court because of a severe lawyer shortage. It all started late last year when the local legal services stopped taking on new matters as it battled internal chaos and a mass exodus of staff. But those on the front line say this crisis is the result of an Aboriginal legal aid sector which has been neglected for too long, as Charmaine Allison reports for Stateline.
At home in Alice Springs, Verna Curtis's mind is constantly on her son.
I think he's getting depressed, the way he's talking. I think he's worrying what's going to happen.
Verna and her husband Frank say it's been 2 months since the 31-year-old was locked up. But like many others in Central Australia, he can't get a lawyer and is having to navigate the NT court system alone.
It is utterly a national disgrace that we're in a situation in 2024 in Australia that we have Aboriginal people who are the most vulnerable, disadvantaged people in the country, some of whom don't speak English, who are going to court without legal representation.
Late last year, one of the nation's largest Indigenous legal aid services, the North Australian Aboriginal Justice Agency, or NAJA, stopped taking on new matters in the outback town. At the time, NAJA had just 3 criminal lawyers left in its regional office out of 17, and those who remained were hanging on by a thread.
It was horrific. It was, you know, just crushing workloads all day, every day, trying their best for their clients in impossible circumstances.
But trouble had long been brewing at NAJA. Last October, its former chief executive Priscilla Atkins brought an unfair dismissal case against the agency, airing allegations of corruption and bullying in the federal court. Meanwhile, the NAJA board claimed it had sacked Ms. Atkins over allegations of forgery, which she has denied, with the court case continuing this year. Since Ms. Atkins' departure, the agency has had 3 different acting CEOs and suffered a mass exodus of lawyers.
No one's given NAJA the opportunity, no one's come forward to assist NAJA, and I find that very just disappointing, really.
Those on the front line say this crisis goes beyond NAJA and has been looming for a long time, the consequence of low pay and even lower morale in the Aboriginal legal aid sector, amid rising crime and prison numbers.
All you then need is a little bit of internal instability, and you get this self-reinforcing cycle which can bring an organisation to its knees.
NAJA is currently contracted to receive more than $80 million over 5 years from the federal government. But due to its current chaos, the Commonwealth has amended NAJA's funding arrangements to allow the NT government to redirect funds from the agency to other organisations. NT Police last year investigated allegations that NAJA's chair and chief financial officer had misused funds. But in a statement, NAJA said police had made no adverse findings, adding it was disappointed to see ongoing attacks being made on the organisation, which are simply not true. Its principal legal officer says nothing will change until the system is properly funded.
Unless the funding of Aboriginal legal services continues to increase to meet that increasing demand, we're going to be in the same situation down the track.
Both the federal and NT attorneys general declined to be interviewed for this story. NAJA says it's aiming to resume youth services by March, followed closely by adult matters, starting with clients who are in custody. For those whose loved ones are caught up in this crisis, change can't come soon enough. Charmaine Allison, ABC News, Alice Springs.
It's been 2 months since flooding after Cyclone Jasper caused destruction in far north Queensland. Repairs to properties continue, but people are still displaced. Some are questioning whether their communities should be rebuilt in the same places.
Sheets and a glow stick. A reminder of the terrifying night Alec Dunn's parents spent clinging to a tree as floodwaters ripped through their home and the surrounding landscape.
My parents were up there. They had to climb, right out these branches at one point. The water was up above the fork.
After flooding in far north Queensland from the aftermath of tropical cyclone Jasper, communities on the banks of the Bloomfield River are questioning whether they should rebuild and return.
A lot of them don't want to go back into those houses that were flooded, and they had to, clamber onto the roofs, and, this is, a part of climate change. This is potentially just going to happen again and again.
People from nearby Wudjil are still displaced.
Wudjil is always be our home, but now it's not our home. We're here in Cooktown.
Living in government-provided temporary accommodation.
Nearly 2 months after the initial disaster, local authorities say that efforts have shifted from the immediate clean-up to post-flood recovery. But with repairs to necessities like housing, potable water and sewerage still underway, there's a long road ahead.
The Queensland Government says it's working to ensure Wudjil residents can return to their homes as soon as possible, and the location of future social housing and public assets will be assessed.
Our access roads are open at the moment, but with a lot more rain we could easily be cut off again. It's finding the right places to rebuild for people in the whole valley, not even Wudjil, the whole valley. I don't think it's a good idea to build in somewhere where it's just flooded.
Locals hoping for a more secure future. Megan Danzy, ABC News, Bloomfield.
It's hoped new research will put an end to social stereotypes around smoking. The study by the Australian National University has found anti-smoking messaging may be targeting the wrong people. Courtney Barrett-Peters reports from Canberra.
When you're asked to picture a smoker, the chances are you'll imagine someone that you've seen in an anti-smoking campaign. Traditionally, these health messages showed people who were uneducated, unemployed, of a First Nations background, or had poor mental health. But new research out of the Australian National University debunks these stereotypes, instead finding the opposite.
Well, we really know that stigmatising smoking is unhelpful, but also people who smoke have to be able to see them in the materials that are helping them to quit. So if they can't identify with it, it's going to be less effective.
The survey found out of 2.5 million Australians who smoke daily, 60% are male, 69% are in paid employment, and 92% did not identify as being First Nations. Professor Emily Banks says these people are not represented in anti-smoking campaigns.
What this says to our policymakers, to our program developers and to the community is this is everybody's problem, and we need to make sure that we're really reaching people who smoke to support them to quit.
I know that I need to quit.
Do you think that you'd be more inclined to quit smoking if there was targeted campaigns for people who look like you?
When you do see people that are in the same world as you and it is this thing, then it will relate more to me, yes.
Smoking remains the leading cause of premature death in Australia. These researchers are hoping that by changing the tune in anti-smoking campaigns, it will encourage more people to put out the habit.
Now to the great mankini scandal. Three-time Olympic equestrian Shane Rose has been cleared of wrongdoing, and that decision has only just come through in the last hour or so, for wearing an orange I don't know why we said orange, but it was an orange mankini during a fancy dress jumping event last weekend at Wallaby Hill in the Southern Highlands. There he is. A complaint was registered with Equestrian Australia. An investigation took place into the cheeky attire chosen for this fancy dress event, and that's really important to point out. It was a fancy dress event. If he had not been cleared, it could have cost him a spot at the 2024 Paris Olympics. And Shane Rose joins us now from Warumbi, southwest of Sydney. Shane, g'day. So this news has only just come through. How does it feel to be a cleared man?
Yeah, no, it feels great, actually. I was always hopeful, but when there's something hanging over that you have no control over, it can be quite stressful. But to get the news, it's great. You know, the intention was always to have a bit of fun at a fancy dress to get back to that, I think it's great.
Yeah, I was like, okay, so take us back to that day, because you wore a couple of outfits on the day, and what was the purpose of it?
Yeah, so it's the first opportunity we get to go out and get the horses out for a new season. There's a couple of official classes before and after, but the main attraction is the event where it's an unofficial event, which is just a fancy dress costume event, jumping over some jumps. And yeah, so I wore 3 costumes on the day. One, a Homer Simpson's character, the Duff Beer Man. I don't mind a beer in the afternoon. I don't drink spirits, so it's quite apt for me. And then the instigation of this was a good friend of mine who's our team vet. He's a Greek man, and he's quite a hairy man. He's worn a mankini out before, and I thought it'd be pretty cool to go in the competition dressed as him. You know, I had Zorba the Greek in the background music, and dressed in a hairy suit with a mankini on. And I thought, well, being true to my word, I can't go and impersonate someone if I'm not willing to do the same myself. And so there it was.
Well, was it a bit painful?
Yes, no, definitely. I've not worn a G-string before, and I probably won't again. It's not the most comfortable attire. And then when you add the difficulties of then riding a horse as well, not something that I would recommend, but it was a bit of fun for the people watching, I think, in the whole.
Yeah, for an Olympian, you looked a little awkward as you were riding around. So what do you think of the fact that it got to the stage where there was this investigation?
Yeah, I think that's probably the most disappointing thing is that someone can remain nameless and put in a complaint, one person, and it can get to this. It's disappointing. I understand Equestrian Australia, once an official complaint has been made, they have to go through a process. I understand the process that what happened had to happen. It's disappointing it got to that, but it's great to know that it's behind me, and I can really focus on preparing as best as I can for the Paris Games, which is only a few months away now.
Yeah. You might have been cleared, but I love this part of the Equestrian Australia statement this afternoon where they find no breach of conduct. But one of the recommendations is for Equestrian Australia to work with clubs and stakeholders to assess minimum dress standards for future events. So I don't think we're going to see the Mankini again.
Yeah, no, well, potentially not. So good that it's happened once, I think. Yeah, look, yeah, I can understand, and potentially that's probably the biggest issue is that, you know, I didn't breach any laws or rules because there were none, and as I said, it's an unofficial fun class. We were trying to have a bit of fun, and as I said, most people did enjoy the spectacle of I guess more the shock that I was willing to do it than anything. And
I was hoping we might have it hanging in the background or something for this interview, but where is it? Where is this Mankini that's brought the sport of equestrian more media coverage than it's ever had before?
Yeah, so it's my truck's it's in. I have a caravan section in the front of my horse truck, and it's as quick as I could get it off, it came off. And I got dressed into more appropriate clothes for the next classes, and it stayed there. And this morning we had to take the truck in for a registration inspection, and it's in at the mechanic. So hopefully they don't go into the living room of the truck and find it wherever it may be sitting. It might have to end up in the Equestrian Hall of Fame. And how are the Olympic preps going? Yeah, no, look, I'm really, really pleased with the way my preparation's going. The horse that I'm hoping to take, Virgil, he's very experienced. He's an older horse, very unlike the one you see in the video there. She's only just starting her education, this young horse, or these horses. But he's an older horse, and he's feeling in as good a shape as he has for years. Really, really looking forward to the next couple of months. Hopefully the event in New Zealand in a couple of weeks goes really well, and you know, we can really get that behind us and then prepare as best as we can, and hopefully be a part of the Australian team winning another medal for the country at the Games. Yeah, indeed. We'll be right behind you, no pun intended. And Shane, yeah, by all reports, you're someone who's done so much for the sport over the years, so I'm so glad that this has ended this way, and good luck in Paris. Yeah, no, thanks very much. It's a great sport, and happy to help where I can, and if I can get to the Games and do us proud, I'll be there. Just no with bells on. Maybe no Mankinis. Cheers, Shane. Thank you. Time now for a bit more sport with Daniela Intili, starting with the new coach of the Australian women's rugby team.
We've got a full-time Wallaroos coach, the national women's team. So we've had a women's team for 30 years, but this is the first time we have a full-time coach. And Joe Yap is determined for the Australians to become a top 4 team. Chloe Hart has more from rugby headquarters.
The Wallaroos have appointed a new head coach, Joe Yap. Having played for England 70 times, she boasts an impressive resume as both a player and a coach, and she has huge aspirations for the Australian side.
The initial vision is to be a top 4 side, to close that gap on the likes of England and New Zealand, and to be a top 4 team consistently, because we've not broken into the top 4 before.
With next year's World Cup approaching and the 2029 World Cup on home soil, Yap says she's the right role model for the Wallaroos, having played at 3 World Cups and captained England in the 2006 World Cup final.
As a player, I've been through that, trying to balance training, trying to balance work, trying to balance family. So that definitely helps when you're having those conversations, because you can say, yeah, like I know what it feels like, but you know, we still need to, this is still what we expect from you if you want to be an international athlete.
The announcement comes off the back of a huge month for the women's 15 side, with $2 million invested in the game earlier this month and pay increases for Super Rugby W players and the Wallaroos.
Chloe Hart reporting there. And Danny, let's turn to swimming now. The World Swimming Championships have been on, and we always go into these with such high expectations because Australia always does so well. It doesn't feel like we've been doing as well as we usually do, but we've really brought it home in the end.
Yeah, 2 gold medals on the final night. And Joe, we didn't have some of the big names that we would usually have, which is probably why we're not seeing that, like the Emma McKeons and the McEwens and all that. But we've had 20-year-old Isaac Cooper. He won the 50 metres backstroke in a time of 24.13 seconds. The Australian team of Iona Anderson, Abby Harkin, Brianna Throssell and Shayna Jack, they won the women's 4x100 metre relay ahead of Sweden. So Australia finishes this meet in 3rd spot behind the United States and China with 3 gold, 9 silver and 4 bronze medals.
Yeah, I really just wanted to do my job for the team. It was going to be a close race, and every single girl here did her job, and that's why we're number 1. Oh, we definitely are in a great position. For us coming here, a lot of us want to just get some experience and race as much as we can for our country, and that's exactly what we did.
And Danny, what happened overnight for a basketball legend?
Lauren Jackson. It was a farewell game. It is the 2nd last round of the WNBL, but likely to be the last time we see her play. And she guided her team to a 3-point win, the Southside Flyers, against the Sydney Flames. She scored 15 points and 6 rebounds.
Fresh off qualifying for the Olympics, Opal's Kayla George has played her 350th WNBL game. She joins only 10 other women to have achieved this monumental milestone. She says it doesn't even feel like 350.
There's been a few milestones this year and it's kind of been like, oh, jeepers, I have been around a long time. I'm kind of like the furniture of the league really at this point. But no, it's been really cool to reflect on some of the really cool people I've been able to play with and against in my last 350. And here's to 350 more, probably not, but hey.
Flames had hoped it would be a record-breaking crowd for the occasion, but numbers came in just under 7,000. The game also marked a special occasion for Lauren Jackson, as she was honoured for her contribution to women's basketball.
Yeah, it's been remarkable, and I'm so thankful.
The game was tight to the very end, with Southside Flyers clinching the win 81-78. This secures the Flyers their spot in the finals, with the Sydney Flames needing to win against Townsville next weekend to keep their finals hopes alive.
Sally Ann Young there. A quick look at tomorrow's weather now in the capital cities around the nation. Brisbane and Sydney showers, Canberra a shower or 2, Melbourne partly cloudy, Hobart and Adelaide cloudy, Perth mostly sunny, and in Darwin showers and a top of 32. Stick with us here on the ABC News channel. Going for a short break now. We'll be back soon.
There's no doubt we are paying higher prices than we should.